Welcome to the Birds and the Bees podcast. This is Braxton Dutson.
That's the key. People aren't talking about it.
Everybody needs to know that porn is not a documentary.
It's not like if we don't talk to kids about sex and sexuality, they're not going to hear about it. They're just not going to hear about it from us.
They have tons of questions, they just don't know how to ask them.
All you have to do is be one chapter ahead. You don't have to know everything. Just one chapter ahead of wherever your child is.
Hey everyone, this is Braxton Dutson, your host of Birds and Bees podcast. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and certified sex therapist here in Salt Lake City, Utah. Every episode of this podcast is meant to bring you information from top professionals in relational and sexual health. I want you to have all the tools, tips, and tricks you need to improve your relationship with your partner and feel confident in teaching your children about sexual health and relationships. Today we're doing that by bringing on Elliott Kronenfeld to talk about becoming a couple by intention, how to improve your intimate relationship with your partner. This is going to be a great interview, and I cannot wait to introduce you to Elliott. Thank you so much for being a part of the Birds and Bees podcast, as well as thank you for being a part of the Hive. I appreciate it when you give reviews on iTunes, and recently, Cello Jamie left a review saying, "I love this podcast. Braxton addresses topics that could be awkward and embarrassing with confidence and an open mind. He obviously knows a lot about sex therapy, but he doesn't come across as a know-it-all. He has a great network of experts that he has invited on the show, and that keeps it interesting. I found the episode on polyamory particularly interesting. I learned things that I didn't even know. Listening to Braxton feels like sitting down and hanging out with a best friend." Thank you, Cello Jamie, for sharing your thoughts and kind words about the show. That helps us so much on iTunes to get out to more and more people, and it really means a lot to hear your thoughts and your views on what the podcast is doing for you. I appreciate that, and I love you. And I'm grateful for you being a Hive mate here in the Hive. I'll be reading more of these reviews in future shows, so be sure to leave your experience with the podcast in a review, and I'll shout it out. I love when you send episodes to friends and family. There's a good chance that you know someone who could use some extra support, especially as we're talking today about couples by intention. We're talking about couples. I mean, you know someone that is in a relationship that could use some support in this. So send them a link, or even just tell them about the show. I have a lot of people tell me how much they enjoyed learning from these interviews, and have heard it from a friend, or they were referred by a friend. So I really appreciate you sending that out. Thank you again for tuning in on birdsandbeespodcast.com, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, and any other format you listen to on the show. Join the conversation by giving us your ideas and your thoughts by calling 385-449-1818. Now on to the interview. All right, I'm here with Elliott Kronenfeld. Elliott, welcome to the show. Appreciate you being on here.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
Oh, man, it has been... So me and Elliott, just a little bit of a history. Me and Elliott have been destined to meet each other for quite some time. I've been to different trainings, and I met Jen, and Jen works with Elliott, and she said, you've got to meet Elliott. You guys would get along super well. I'm like, oh, this sounds great. And then just this past June 2018, we met in ASECT, and it was just a wonderful experience meeting up with you.
It was really great to finally meet you face to face.
So tell me,
I feel like I've known you for a long time.
Right? It just feels like we clicked really well, and I love that. So tell me a little bit about yourself. You're in Boston. You're a really cool person. What else do you do besides just being amazing?
Well, thank you. I get to talk to really cool and amazing people like yourself. So I am here in Boston. I am the founder and clinical director of Insight Psychotherapy. So we have a large group practice here in the Boston area. We have 2 clinics, and we're one of the largest group practices in the area. And, we really work with people through all stages of the life cycle, from young children through older adults, through college students and relationships, sex therapy. We have folks that specialize in trauma. We really run the whole gamut. So it's really nice to be able to work with not just individuals and couples, but with whole families.
Wow.
So we do a lot with that. Besides that, I just recently came out with a TED Talk, and as we're here to talk about, my new book, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah, the Couples by Intention. Tell me a little bit about Couples by Intention. This is like, if I remember correct, you said that you worked with a lot of couples to even create this book.
So Couples by Intention actually is a group that I run here in my clinic. And so I, as a sex therapist, was doing really interesting work with couples around what allows couples to be successful. Because couples come to me for a variety of reasons. My 3 core specialties are infidelity recovery, infertility, and intimacy skills. And so I really get to see couples at varying stages of connection and discord. And I started noticing some themes regardless of why couples were coming to me. And it was that they thought that love and sex was supposed to save them.
Oh.
And I said, we have some lessons to learn here. And when I started hearing similar conversations happening over and over again, regardless of why the couples were coming to see me, I thought, why don't we just put everybody in a room together and they could just have the conversation themselves? And I thought, why don't we just put everyone into a room together and they can have a conversation themselves? So I started a group called Couples by Intention, and it's where I took couples that were in a relatively good place, nobody that was in a place where, they were dealing with severe trauma or they were not solid enough to be able to handle the conversation. And there were straight couples and gay couples and lesbian couples and bi couples and queer trans couples and
wow.
monogamous couples and polyamorous couples. And I thought, there's a thread that runs through all of these. And let's put them all together. And so it is a 12-week group. And these couples come together, and each week we talk about one topical area and how that is done in our relationships with intention. In other words, how not to be a couple by default.
Ooh.
A couple with intention.
And what tends to be the default what have you found to be the default of couples when they come in? I mean, is there some specific signs?
It's a good question. And part of it is the default state is the same, but how we get there is different. Mm-hmm. And the way we talk about it in the group is that a couple by default is the couple that wakes up and says, I'm in this because I was in it yesterday. Mm. I'm in it because I don't know how to get out. I'm in it because I'm afraid to leave. I'm in it because I'm afraid nobody else will love me. I'm in it because it's what's expected of me. I'm in it because I don't know how to do the work. I'm in it because I'm stuck. I'm in it because I'm afraid. Mm-hmm. And whatever brought you there, and I'm sure that your listeners have a sense of what that feels like to be in a relationship by default. Mm-hmm. And we talk about how every relationship has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And we never know when the middle is. And sometimes we don't know when the end is until we look behind us. Uh-huh. But that every relationship isn't meant to last a lifetime. Sometimes the most meaningful relationships last 15 minutes, and they're over, and they're complete, and they're deeply meaningful. Some relationships do last a lifetime beyond death, when we carry on the relationship after the death of a loved one. And getting people to understand that you get to make these choices. That just because you enter a relationship doesn't mean you're stuck in a relationship. And that's the relationship by default.
Wow. So the relationship by default is really being in a relationship, waiting for something extreme to happen to show you, this is the end of the relationship. You really don't get to choose much of it. You're just choosing because it's what you did yesterday. It might be easiest. There's a lot of fear about looking at what kind of power you'd have if you were to own what you want in the relationship or let go of what you don't want in the relationship.
Well, and it also means if you're in a relationship by default that you haven't been doing your work.
And you haven't been doing your work. Yeah. So as you set this up with creating and working with couples to start changing from a default relationship into couples by intention, I mean, what are some of the steps? What are some of the, I think you referred to this as we've been talking before, as the glue to a relationship versus, well, we have sex and we're in love, so that's a really good relationship.
Right, and I tell people that, love and sex is wonderful, and when it works well, we cherish it and we love it, and it excites us and it fills us. But love and sex is not the glue in a relationship. It is oftentimes a pleasurable experience, and that we enjoy deeply. But in reality, the glue in relationships, the thing that holds us together, is intention and curiosity.
Wow.
And that if we're going to be in a highly functional relationship, we must do it with intention and with curiosity. And the intention piece really speaks to the fact that we have to make choices every day. And this is how we move out of a relationship by default. I have to make a choice to be here. And I can't promise you forever. But what I can do is promise you today, in that I will wake up every day and I will make a choice. And I can look at you and I can say, today I choose you. I choose you because you're beautiful, because the sex is good. But I choose you because you're a hard worker and you're nice to my mother who can be difficult. You're a good provider. And I choose you when you paid the rent late and you dinged the car. And in return, I need to wake up every single day and feel chosen. Because I'm a good parent. Because I think about you and I let you know that you are thought of when I am away from you. When I do that extra chore in the house because I know you hate doing it. And when I leave my dirty, skanky underwear turned inside out on the floor next to the hamper and I burn the dinner. Because ultimately, that is something we all want. We want to feel chosen. And so I work with couples very much to say, how would you feel chosen? What is it that your partner does that would make you feel chosen? And do you know what would allow your partner to feel chosen as well? And these sound like relatively simple questions, but they're actually very difficult. Mm-hmm. And we can spend a significant amount of time just talking about the word chosen.
Wow.
The curiosity piece is that second piece of the glue. And I will often stop a couple in the middle of it and say, hold on. You just said something really important. And I'll look at the partner and I'll say, what are you curious about? Because I'm curious about so much. And because curiosity is that thing that keeps us invested. Because as long as I'm curious about you, it means I haven't taken you for granted. As long as I'm curious about you, it means that I don't assume I know everything about you. As long as I am curious about you, it means there is still room for you to influence my thinking. As long as I am curious about you, there is still an opportunity for me to stretch and to grow, because I'm going to see the world differently. As long as I am curious about you. And that is a hard thing to remember. Because in the beginning, when we're in that infatuation stage, curiosity is easy. Mm-hmm. Infatuation starts to pass, that curiosity becomes a harder thing to remember. And that's why I talk about it as a strategic relationship skill. And we have to learn to be curious in a strategic way, because it lets the other partner know that I'm listening, that I understand, that I care, and that you are chosen. Because I am not taking you for granted, and I am not making assumptions, because assumptions are the opposite of curiosity.
Yeah, that's the assumption you know exactly what's going on. I love that the way you put it is as you have these relationships that are in the honeymoon phase or the beginning of relationships, we're so into this curiosity and excitement of learning about another person and their interest in you, and they're choosing you, and this is so exciting. The way that you're pulling on this for a relationship that maybe is 15 years old or 20 or 40 years old, all the way across that spectrum, having these, or even a couple years old, but the curiosity, I cannot believe how even in all of my relationships or all of the people that come in to see me, that is seriously one of the first things that we start working on as well is, wait, they just said something and it seems as though you already know what your answer is, and there's almost no curiosity as to what that other person means, and there's so much assumptions.
Yeah, because we spend so much time in our own head that in the book I do a whole chapter on listening and how important listening is, because we have been told That active listening is when we go, yeah, You know, we give those really non-verbals, and we nod our head a lot, and we wrinkle up our eyes, and we let people know that I'm paying attention. When in reality, that's not listening at all. And I do this very, very early on in my work with couples, that we will spend weeks just learning how to listen before we start attacking any of the issues that they bring into session. Mm-hmm. As I tell them quite openly, is that before we start talking about the things that you feel really vulnerable about, we have to build a skill set. Mm-hmm. And to just go in and start going after those things that already make you feel vulnerable, without giving you the skills to manage them, is really setting you up for failure. So we're going to start with some skill building. And we do that for a number of weeks first. Mm-hmm. And I have this exercise in the book called the listening hour.
Okay. And
in the listening hour, and we start with very easy topics because I want them to practice the skill. I tell them, from the talking perspective, it's about talking from the I. I think, I feel, I want, I experience, and how not to do that finger wagging in the face of the other. But you do this, and when you say you, that awful you, but to speak from the I. And most couples can get that part pretty quickly. The harder part about intimate communication is actually the listening part. And what I tell them is that there's two really important jobs you have to do when you listen. The first job is to bear witness. And to bear witness means I don't make it about me, but I do make it about you. So the person who's listening isn't from the I perspective. The person that's listening is from the you perspective, which means I don't go up into my head and I don't have to get defensive because it's not about me. I don't have to defend myself at all because anything you say has nothing to do with me, even if you're telling me what a jerk I am. Mm-hmm. Because that's just telling me what your reaction is to what's going on.
And that's a hard concept.
It is a really hard concept. And so I spend a lot of time playing with this. So I don't have to be defensive. I don't predict. I don't prejudge. I don't strategize. I don't manage. All that stuff we do up in our head while we're actively listening to our partner. Mm-hmm. Which means I'm not taking in the important stuff that you're trying to give me. And when I'm up in my head saying, go ahead and take a breath, because I know what I'm going to respond with.
Making your defense.
Like I'm already starting to figure out how I'm going to maneuver around this emotional blast you're giving me. Whereas in reality, if I was just bearing witness to what was going on with you, I don't have to do any of that work. Listening is actually much easier than we make it. Mm-hmm. The second really important job we have to do is we have to expand the story. And I always tell people, it's like the mold that starts to grow on the backsplash behind your kitchen sink. Mm-hmm. You just take a paper towel and wipe it away. It's just going to come right back. You got to get in there with bleach. You really got to clean that stuff out. And the same is true with our partners, that if we don't get the whole story, we're going to have that same argument over and over and over again because we haven't gotten to the root. Mm-hmm. And so when we can bear witness, right, and I can get your story from you, and I can expand that story by really using curiosity as a strategic relationship skill, and I can ask questions like, so how often do you experience that? Mm-hmm. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is that for you? How do you wish that had turned out instead? How would you know that I understood? What behavior would I show you that would let you know that I understand what you're telling me? And I teach them how to be curious and how to frame questions so it doesn't sound like an interrogation or a cross-examination, mm-hmm. but it actually shows real curiosity. And once couples get it, they have reported back to me that their arguing, their fighting, their discord has been reduced by more than 50%.
Wow.
Because they're actually listening to each other. And now they're talking about the real issues and not all of this upper surface level.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking, when you're saying surface level, we're talking anything from you walk in the house and the argument begins about, I've had a couple in arguing about chips before. Why you ate chips instead of pretzels. And it's not about, and I share that experience just because so many couples are like, really? Chips? That's a dumb thing to argue about. And I'm like, okay, but it's all surface, whether it's chips, whether it's the car getting dinged, whether it's, you don't listen to me. There's so
I
much
always
more
say,
to it.
honey, it's never about the dishes.
It's never about the dishes. It's not
Never.
about the nail, if you've ever seen that video.
It's not.
It's not. And so really getting to I love the thought or what you're saying about getting the use of the use of witnessing, being able to be curious and get involved, because you really cannot be curious very well. I mean, you can be curious, but it can be so hard and it's so vulnerable to sit and ask someone, wow, you were hurt? And I want to know more about how you were hurt or how this has affected you, and to know that a part of you may have been involved in that hurt, but they're experiencing that. It's taking that away and then being able to provide the support that your partner wants and needs.
Well, you just said a really important word, and it's a word that we use an awful lot in our group and in my work with couples, and that's the word vulnerable.
Mm.
And it's a word that most people struggle to define. And the way that I explain it to people, I always have them think about the animals in the Kalahari, right? Which ones are the vulnerable ones? It's not the lion.
No.
It's not the rhino. It's the ones that are going to be eaten.
Yes.
Right? It's the ones that prey.
Uh-huh.
And in our relationship, when we start to feel like the prey, when we start to feel vulnerable, like our partner could eat us, could consume us, could take us over, that is that feeling of vulnerability, that feeling of exposure. And the thing that we talk a lot about is my definition of intimacy. And I describe intimacy as the balance of safety and vulnerability.
Wow.
And we have to keep the two of them balanced. Because if we are so safe that we can't be vulnerable, we are shut down. And if we are so vulnerable that we can't feel safe, we are terrified. But we have to balance safety and vulnerability. And as we do that over the length of our relationship, the safety deepens, the vulnerability deepens, and we can experience a different kind of intimacy with each other. In other words, I can be vulnerable, but I trust you not to consume me.
Wow.
I can trust you. And it means we talk a lot about boundaries, and we talk about what makes for good boundary. And we often think that because we're an intimate couple, we shouldn't have boundaries between us. But in fact, the healthiest relationships have the clearest boundaries. And so we have to negotiate what a healthy boundary is so that we can balance vulnerability and safety, and that has to be a constant negotiation throughout the life course of our relationship. That isn't something we do once at the beginning and assume that it's going to be good forever. Mm-hmm. Because our relationship becomes more complicated, because our lives become more complicated, because my needs and desires change over time.
Oh, yeah.
So it has to be a constant negotiation.
And I think what you said there is so important. I'm going to have you repeat it. When you're feeling too safe or when you're feeling too vulnerable, can you repeat that?
Sure. So the reason why the balance is so important is because if I'm so safe that I can't be vulnerable, I am shut off. I'm closed down. It doesn't matter how many flowers you bring, the door is closed, you can't get in. Mm-hmm. If I am so vulnerable and I don't feel safe, I am terrified. It is a trauma reaction. Mm-hmm. I am on guard. I am self-protected. You cannot get me to be open to you there either.
Wow. I when you said that, I got chills because that is so true. If you were not balancing one way or the other, and it is a constant sliding scale, you're going to either start feeling more protected or looking for the safety, especially if you're feeling terrified. And some couples are bouncing back and forth so fast that they go to the terrified and then they feel hurt and then they run back to safety and they're completely guarded. And this balance. Wow, Elliott. Wow.
It's a really good question to ask your partner. If you're starting to notice that somebody is really in that zone of safety, what would it take to allow more vulnerability in? Or if somebody is really vulnerable, what would it take to make you feel more safe? Like, we have to address that before we can talk about whatever the dishes are representing.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so I teach couples to ask each other that question. This is, again, curiosity is a strategic relationship skill. What would it take to allow more vulnerability here? What would it take to allow you to open up to me? Because I'm trying to bring myself to you, and I don't know how to get in.
Mm-hmm.
Or I feel like you're on guard all the time. What do we need to do to allow you to have more safety so that you can connect with me?
Mm-hmm. One thing I love about that too is just as much as it almost is innate for us to look at our partner and say, what am I experiencing about you? And this is how I'm feeling about you. One thing I encourage my couples to do as well is to notice when they and where they are at on their scale, where they're saying, okay, in my relationship, am I feeling guarded? Am I feeling terrified and completely vulnerable? And what do I need to get into the middle of both of those? What do I need for balance, and how can I communicate that?
Those are really important questions. And I think that sometimes when we ask ourselves that question, we can get locked up in our own head. But it's an important question for us to ask, for sure.
Yeah.
And when we can answer that, we can do something about it. But when we can't, to have our partner ask us that question is such a gift.
Oh, yeah. And that's awesome. I love that that's the case. Being able to connect in that way. So I as we're talking about this, I can even just hear some some listeners being like, well, if my partner really loves me, or my partner wants to be with me, or I just really want my partner to understand me without us having to go through these questions, like, why can't they just understand and be curious and not have to tell me about it? I continue to hear partners and couples saying, you know, if I tell them this, or if I express all this stuff, I really want them to just do this innately to show that they love me. They're looking for the love from their partner by knowing exactly what they need and giving it to them without the communication.
But you know, there's something in there that changes the locus of responsibility.
Mm.
And there's something in there that's a little troubling. When couples come to me and they'll talk about, you know, I'm trying to make my partner happy. You know, I'm trying to make my partner feel loved. And I'm going to slow down a little bit here. One of the rules that we have in my office that I lay out right in the beginning, and it's certainly one of the rules in our Couples by Intention group as well, is we have something called the no helping rule.
Mm-hmm.
And it really sounds almost counterintuitive to what we might expect in a relationship. You know, because we're supposed to help each other. We're supposed to love each other. We're here to help each other be better. And there's something counterintuitive to what actually happens in a relationship, though. And I tell people that there are three core reasons and mannerisms in which we help in a relationship. The first is when I actually do it for you. I'm going to cut your meat for you. I'm going to call and make your doctor's appointment for you. I am going to clean out your car. And we think we're helping.
Mm-hmm.
Every time my partner cleans out my car, I get really frustrated because papers that I was trying to keep get thrown away, right? I'm like, it's not helping. The second way that we help is I'm going to tell you what the right thing to do is. Don't forget, when you go in and talk to your manager, here's what you should say. Mm-hmm. Right? When the kids come home, here's what you should say to the kids. Now I'm going to teach you, like I'm going to teach you.
Yeah.
I'm going to fool you. And then the third way that we help, which is probably the most insidious way of helping, is when I help in my own head without you even knowing I'm doing it. You know, this is going to be a really hard conversation for Braxton. He's not going to handle it well. It's going to make him very sad. So, you know what? I'm just going to work around him. I'm just going to go do this thing over here. I'm going to solve the problem. And he doesn't even need to know it happened because it's going to ruin his day, and I'm just going to do it.
Uh-huh.
And when we help in any one of those ways, it is based on the assumption that I am better than you, I am smarter than you, I am more capable than you, I have more ability than you. You can't do it without me. If you don't do it my way, it's not going to be as good. So many assumptions that are just awful. And in reality, what it does is it limits our partner's ability to grow and thrive into the best person they can be. Because as adults, the way that we learn and grow and thrive is that we have to wrestle some really hard stuff to the ground, and we have to struggle with it. And through that, we get learned experience, and we get insight and wisdom, and we can be better, we can grow, and we can thrive. But when our partner is doing all of our helping for us, we don't get the opportunity to struggle. And that is a missed opportunity. Now, of course, with every rule, there are exceptions. And that is, if I ask for your help around something very, very, very specific, and you agree to help me, or if you offer help on something very specific, and I accept it, that's fine. But because then there's a communication, there's a negotiation. But it doesn't give you carte blanche to help all over my life. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end to it. Braxton, would you take the groceries out of the car and put them in the cabinet for me? Sure, happy to do that. That doesn't mean cut my onions, salt my stew pot, and set the table for me. That's not what I asked. Right? That helping is specific and it's time limited.
Specific and time limited. Yeah.
Yeah. And so helping, this no helping rule, is that I don't have to help you with your feelings, because they're your feelings. I assume you can handle them. And if you can't, you're going to talk to me. Right? Because then I have to balance safety and vulnerability so you can be intimate with me and tell me where you may need help. And I can see if that's something I can do. But I guess what I'm reacting to is this assumption, the default status of I have to manage your feelings for you. I have to be responsible for how you feel in this relationship. When I don't. Because how you feel has nothing to do with me. It all is about how you are reacting to what's going on here. And that's your work to do.
Wow. So going into recognizing that, first off, it's all about, what their feelings are, what your feelings are, your feelings. And being able to continue to ask again, opening up that conversation of what is it I need? What is it I think that they need? And how do I have a conversation about it? Not demanding things from them. Or what am I trying to do to fix my partner? And if you're recognizing that that's what you're doing, you're nervous about, if I'm nervous about Elliott being unable to take my comments, or unable to take that a dish broke today because we don't, our finances are in a hard spot, and I try and go around fixing it and creating a way for you not have to deal with those emotions. What is there a way for me to change that? Is that when I bring up a conversation and say, hey, by the way, the dish broke, or hey, I've been bothered, or I've been feeling some emotion about the way you talk to the kids, and I'm feeling distress about it. Can we have a conversation? Are those the ways that we can start addressing those versus just holding them in?
Well, I think that it goes in two ways. If I notice that my partner is struggling, I can say, Can I be curious? That's a great opportunity, right? Can I be curious about something?
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, because then it's really more about me and my curiosity. I'm noticing that, you seem to be a little on edge. You seem to be really angry lately. I'm not angry. Right? Oh, okay, so you're not angry. So can you tell me what you are then? Because it seems to me I'm getting angry. If you're not angry, what is it?
Wow.
I'm frustrated. I'm stressed. I'm overwhelmed. I'm like, oh, because I react to stressed and overwhelmed very differently than I react to angry, right? And so if I can be curious about something, and my partner will allow me to invite a story back. Tell me the story about what's going on with you right now. Because I'm not understanding what's going on here. I can tell you what I'm sensing, and you can tell me if that's right or wrong. But I'm clearly missing something, and I'm wondering if it's something that either you have insight into, or if it's something we can explore together. And teaching people how to have that language, and it sounds a little therapized, but I think that what couples are realizing is that when they can actually create their own unique, intimate language that is unique to them and no other couple. I obviously speak in a very generalized, here's how we're going to teach it in the office, but I teach them to create their own words. in a way that, some couples do it with humor. Some couples do it very clinically. Some couples do it very directly. Some couples use euphemisms. So I start with the model, and I'm like, okay, so let's learn about how you communicate, and let's put that into your language, and now you go home and try it.
Mm-hmm.
And the other way of doing it is being able to say, other than me being curious, is saying, I'm struggling with something, and there's something I'd like to share. Are you at a place where you can be curious?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And using curiosity, it takes the responsibility off, because I still own my story. It's not your story. My story is my story, and your story is your story, and I don't have to own your story ever.
No.
And that's freeing. That's freedom, baby.
Freedom, completely. And that can be a really hard step to take.
Right. But when and it doesn't mean I don't love you and I don't care about you and I don't want to participate, I don't want to be involved, but it means that I can't own it.
Mm-hmm. Would you say...
I can't own your story.
When you're owning it or when you're trying to own it, that then is the helping method we're talking about. You're trying to come in and fix that situation or whatever's happening, the frustration.
Sure. When you come home from work and you're seemingly angry, but you're emotional, you're charged up, you're at an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10, and I'm trying to make you feel better. It's not my job to make you feel better. It's my job to let you know that as you work through whatever it is you're working through, if I can be of assistance, you can ask for help, and I can offer help. Right? And the way that you get through that, you may just say, listen, I just need to be alone. I need to be quiet tonight. I need to put on my headset and go listen to music for an hour. Or I need to go for a walk. Or I need to go to the gym. I need to take care of me first. And if you're saying to me, Elliott, I need to take care of me right now, that is the most important thing you can do. Mm-hmm. As long as you tell me, you know what, Elliott, it's not about you. We're fine. It's something over there. I'm not ready to talk about it yet. I'm good. You're allowed to have an off day. Mm-hmm. You're allowed to have feelings. You're allowed to struggle. I don't have to fix it. As long as you can confirm for me that there's nothing I need to own or participate in, something happened at work, has nothing to do with me. If you need me, I'm going to be over there. Can I check in with you in 20 minutes? Mm-hmm. Great. Sit here, listen to your music. Right? I'm going to make tea. Would you like a cup? Nope. Good. See you in 20 minutes.
Wow. And then it's time specific. And yeah, everything. You're just really checking and getting very involved or know what expectations or what the other person needs, what you need. Wow.
Zero assumptions.
Zero assumptions.
The goal is to get to zero assumptions. There'll always be some assumptions, but the goal is to get as close to zero as you can. But when we can't have that level of discourse, then I'm sitting here assuming that our relationship is struggling, we're in trouble, that I did something, that I'm responsible for something, you're mad at me. And, in a simple, it has to do with work. It's not about you. I don't need anything right now. That can take away so many of my assumptions. Mm-hmm. And if I can adhere to the no helping rule, I can say, great, if you need me, I'm going to be in the living room. My show is on. Right? Oh, yeah. Come get me. I'm available to you. But if you need your space and time, I'm good. Mm-hmm. Right? Right now, I don't need anything. So I'm going to go watch my show. And when you're in a different place, or if you need me, I'll be over there. If it's okay, I'll check in with you after my show's over.
Wow. I just am really enjoying hearing how much you can give to someone by allowing them to experience what they're experiencing, being curious about what they need or being curious about what's going on, and then avoiding the pitfall of saying, oh, you're feeling this way? Now I need to fix this for you. That's right. That is the pitfall. All of a sudden it becomes my responsibility because you've had a bad day. You've had a bad day. Well, let me try and fix it for you. Oh, well, you had a bad day at work. You know what? You need to quit that job, or you need to tell your boss off, or you need to do this, and it's not what they're looking for. That's right. We're not getting curious. We're assuming that the boss is the bad person, or we're assuming that it's this coworker. And we're also assuming that feedback is helpful. Exactly. When in fact, it may be adding to the stress and agita. and then a fight breaks out, and then all of a sudden it becomes about the relationship, which is the big fear in the first place.
And then we kitchen sink the whole thing.
We kitchen sink the whole thing. Yeah, man, what a spiral. What a spiral to be in. And if we get curious, it can completely thwart that whole spiral. And it involves a fair amount of trust to be able to say, hey, you're frustrated. Man, I'm sorry that you're frustrated. What tell me what's going on. Is there something that you need? No, I just need this. I need this. Okay, I'm going to be in the other room watching my show. And that involves a whole big amount of trust for you to say, okay, I'm going to trust that this is about work and that this is exactly what you need and that you are going to come get me if you do need help. There's a lot of trust there.
That's right.
And
That's right.
Yeah.
And I assume that you are mature enough and adult enough that you can handle your own feelings. And I'm not going to parentify you or infantilize you or diminish you. And if you can name a feeling or bear through it, that's fine. And if you can't, it's your job to let me know, because I need you to show up.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to do your work.
Yeah. Wow. Do you ever find it's trying to come back to the love and sex as the glue? Do you find couples wanting to return to that in the sense of, okay, when we get through this, then we're going to be having sex 3 times a week, or I'm going to see this type of love from my partner? Do you find couples assuming that that's going to be the next, or the outcome of working through?
Well, I think that a lot of couples have these narratives that tell them that love and sex are the measurement to let them know whether or not they're okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we spend a lot of time talking about the difference between love and infatuation.
Mm.
Infatuation has anticipation to it. It is immediate. It is in the here and now. It is high energy. It is somewhat obsessive. It is all-consuming. It is very exciting. It is hyper-focused. There is a sense of perfectionism in infatuation. And infatuation is a really important stage in relationship development. And we love the infatuation stage. It's like a full tank of gas every day. And it's amazing. And then I say to couples, so what's the difference between infatuation and love? And what's interesting is when they start to talk about love, it is almost in many ways the opposite of infatuation. It is not obsessive. It is not always high energy. It is not always hyper-focused. There's not a lot of anticipation to it. In fact, there's a high degree of distress tolerance. There's a high degree of anxiety to love. There is a high degree of longing, of not getting needs met. It is long-term focus, not short-term focus. It is not always about the here and now. And there are times that infatuation comes back. There are times when I go to my partner's place of work and I watch people reacting to my partner. And he's got a big personality, and I'm like, wow, that's going home with me, right? That infatuation, because I get to see through other people's eyes. I'm like, oh, that's right. And I get excited all over again. And sometimes that infatuation can last 2 weeks. Sometimes it lasts 10 minutes till we're in the car again and we end up talking about the dishes. The infatuation is gone. But that's okay, because infatuation comes and goes. Love is that thing that is foundational. But it doesn't always feel good. Love, it's not always the hearts and flowers we get from Hallmark, because sometimes it really is about distress tolerance. Mm-hmm. And so really getting couples to understand the difference between the two. And so when we're having a tough time or a partner comes home after a hard day, love and sex may be the measurement about whether the relationship as a whole is doing okay. And so one of the things I do early on is I spend time with couples asking them, who their love and relationship role models are.
Oh.
And we spend a lot of time, your parents, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, neighbors, characters on television, in movies, in books. Who taught you what a healthy relationship was supposed to look like? And then we ask ourselves, is that the truth that we believe? And is that the reality that we actually want in our lives? And where do we have the power to edit that script? I had one guy say to me once, it was really insightful. We were talking about how we feel like we have these relationship scripts. And he was talking about, he was a single man who was really looking for a relationship and really struggling on why he couldn't find one. And he couldn't understand. And when we started talking about relationship role models, he said to me, he said, you know what? Oh my God, it makes sense now. Because I feel like we're all doing Shakespeare. I can tell because we're all wearing the same kind of clothing. I can tell by the set it all looks like Shakespeare. We're dressed like Shakespeare. I can tell by the dialect we're doing Shakespeare. But everyone else is doing Richard III, and I'm doing Taming of the Shrew.
Oh, wow.
And I said, exactly. And so part of this is we're in the same world, and sometimes we have to ask ourselves, where do we want to edit our scripts? And then when we look at our relationship script and our love and intimacy script that's been given to us from the family of origin we grew up in, our skin color and race, our gender, our economics, our education, the political leanings of our family,
the social media,
and all of it, we put all of that together and we come up with a script for what love and sex is supposed to look like. And then when the reality hits that and it doesn't match, we're confused. And so we have to really look at, is that script the right script for us? And where do we start to insert ourselves into it and edit it? So
knowing we can change that script on our own, and that makes it your normal, and that makes it okay.
Right. And you will find somebody else who reads from the same script.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that we can understand how that goes, because everyone has their own unique script.
Yeah. And maybe this is a question for another topic for another day. I know it touches on one that we need to cover in Birds and Bees podcast. However, does what we're talking about, how can this be used to help couples who have experienced betrayal in the relationship, maybe feeling an infidelity or just anywhere along this spectrum of I've been betrayed by my partner and trust is really been shot in a relationship?
I do an awful lot of infidelity recovery.
Oh, do you?
It is, actually a significant amount. And I love this work because when it happens, most people assume that when there's an infidelity, the relationship is just over. And
that's one of those scripts right there.
One of those scripts, right?
Uh-huh.
Exactly. So many couples, when they've had an infidelity, can recover and come back strong and connected. And if you read the book Couples by Intention, there are couples in there who have had infidelity and have come back stronger. And part of that is about learning the core skills that were missing before. And Esther Perel, who wrote Mating in Captivity, and for any of your listeners who haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. This is a wonderful resource. And one of the things that Esther says is that the victim of the infidelity is not the victim of the marriage. And I love that quote, and I use it a lot because it's true. That what was going on before the infidelity, there's so much wonderful research. Dr. Nicole Zapian just did a wonderful study on a phenomenological study on what leads to infidelity. And she found 8 core phenomenon in her studies that talked about what was going on in the relationship that allowed infidelity to happen. And so we're starting to get these bodies of research. I'm right now doing my PhD study. Mm-hmm. And looking at my dissertation is actually going to be looking at taking Dr. Zapian's study to the next level of once that infidelity has happened, what are the phenomena that determine whether people stay together or break?
Oh, wow.
And so that's what I'm working on now.
Yeah, she has a book, and I always mess up the title, but it's for therapists, if I remember correctly, like Working with Infidelity. It's got a big maze or like a...
Right. Well, this is her phenomenological study.
That's her study, right? Or
That's her study.
It's what it's based off of?
Right. And if you read that book, you'll read the 8 phenomenon that she found in her study. It's a wonderful resource.
Wow. Great. So this is something that, as people are working through a betrayal, working through an infidelity, that these pieces play heavy into being able to heal from it, on top of working through that infidelity. But these are still core concepts.
That's right.
Great. And I'm curious, do you have I know you said something about the listening hour. Are there any exercises we could take listeners through right now, or anything that you could leave with the listeners?
Well, I think that the book Couples by Intention is full of exercises.
Oh, is it? Okay.
It is full of exercises, and I tell people that when you get the book, also get a journal.
Okay.
Throughout the book, I'll tell you, all right, get out your journal. Here's an exercise. I want you to do this exercise in your journal and answer these reflective questions. Because I want the book to really be a teaching tool. And in the book, you'll actually meet the couples I work with. These are real people. These are real conversations. Mm-hmm. Obviously, names have been changed. But you're going to meet the couples that I work with and see the exercises they do and how they came together in individual couples therapy as well as in the group, and where they were at the beginning of therapy and where they were at the end of therapy, and to see how their relationship has changed. But for now, one of the things that I would suggest a couple to do is just get a simple piece of paper and make 2 columns. Mm-hmm. And in the first column, just to list out assumptions I have about my partner.
Oh, wow.
In the second column, what I believe my partner assumes about me. And just list it out. And you know what a great way to enter into a conversation. And if you both do that, and you can say, okay, let's check our assumptions. Are we right? Is this an assumption or is this a fact? Do you think this about me?
Wow. That would be quite an intense activity.
Yeah, I am assuming this about you. Is that true? Mm-hmm. And being able to do that, and I recommend that nothing in the book and no exercises I do in the book is ever a replacement for really good couples work with a trained therapist. Mm-hmm. But if you've got a really strong couple that just really wants to deepen their relationship, that could be an exercise that once you've learned how to have enough safety and vulnerability, you've been able to grow your intimacy balance. That's a really interesting exercise. And you can limit it and say, let's talk about co-parenting. Mm-hmm. Assumptions I have about you in regards to co-parenting. What I think you assume about me in regard to co-parenting. So you can really narrow the scope so it doesn't get overwhelming.
So you don't feel flooded.
Yeah, if we're having trouble co-parenting, or if we're talking about money, mm-hmm. right? We're trying to come up with a budget. And money is such a scary topic for so many couples. Let's start with what we assume about money and each other. And then let's start talking about how we're actually going to make plans together.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like a really cool exercise to be able to do together. Checking in, working through that. Is there, as we're getting towards the end of our time, I'm curious if there's, out of everything we've talked about and all the wonderful information you've given us today, to build our relationship into an intentional relationship, what would be maybe one takeaway message or something that if they were to leave this recording or leave this podcast and you want them to remember one thing, what would that be?
I'm actually going to leave you with 2.
Okay, we can go with 2.
I think first is that it is intimacy is the balance of safety and vulnerability. And really checking in with yourself about where you are on that balance between safety and vulnerability with your partner, and what would it look like to change that balance. The second thing is that the glue in the relationship is intention and curiosity. You have to show up every day and make a choice and ask yourself, what am I curious about now?
Wonderful. Wow. I love those those concepts that you left with, and I really appreciate you being on the Birds and Bees podcast with me.
It was a joy to be with you.
So if people are wanting to get a hold of your book, is it available on Amazon? Do you have a website that you prefer people to go to?
So it's available at Amazon, at Barnes & Noble, at most major bookstores. If you go to a bookstore and it's not there, ask them. They'll get it for you. You can also look it up at couplesbyintention.com.
Wonderful. And what I'm working on right now, just to let listeners know, is that birdsandbeespodcast.com, I'm working on an affiliate page. So that what an affiliate page is essentially when you hear us talking about something on the episode, that I can then send or keep a link on there for these different books that come out. And Elliott's will be one of the first I'm hoping to have done with Amazon, so that you can go over to birdsandbeespodcast.com, or even here in the show notes, click on a link. It'll send you straight to the book, so you don't have to do any typing. And what that actually does is, once you buy the book, that they throw us, a few nickels or pennies our way that helps support the show, and it also supports, in this situation, Elliott in the work that he's doing. And so you're helping those that are willing to take their time and donate their time to Birds and Bees podcast, as well as helping the podcast continue on and get us the equipment that we need, and also for the time that we put into all this, and we really appreciate that. So if you're looking to get Couples by Intention, check out birdsandbeespodcast.com, or even the link in the show notes, so that you can, as you're buying that, it's the same buying experience with Amazon. You don't have to do anything different. You're just clicking on a link. So I'd appreciate that a lot, and I appreciate you listening to Birds and Bees podcast. Thank you so much again, Elliott, for being on here. This is great information, and I know that the hive mates here at Birds and Bees are have definitely received a lot of information that they can use on a daily basis, and I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Be well.
You too. This has been another episode of the Birds and Bees podcast. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions about the show, comments, or questions you would like addressed in another episode, please give us a call at 385-449-1818. Leave your voicemail and your question, or you can also email us at birdsandbeespodcast@gmail.com, or visit us online at birdsandbeespodcast.com.